Every DAW has endless potential, and it's important to know what yours can do. I use Logic, and I've been using it for a while now, so I've developed a lot of tips and tricks that I use throughout all of my productions. These tips have helped me make higher quality music much more efficiently. So today we're going to run through a couple of the Logic tips and tricks that I've learned over the years. But before we do that, my name is John from Sandscape Audio. We're a music production resource community, and we post content like this all the time, so make sure you're subscribed here. Also, feel free to head over to sandscapeaudio.com after the video and check out some of the resources that we have available. All right, the first tip I want to discuss is the option drag. A lot of these tips are pretty simple, but super effective. So option drag is a way to make a duplicate of something, and you can do it in a couple different ways. So the first way is to just grab a region in a track and hold option, click on that region, and just drag it to where you want the copy to be. Another way you can use it is by clicking the actual track, holding option, and then click and just drag it right below it or anywhere you like, and it copies the track as well as all the regions included. If you want to copy any effects in your effect chain at all, you can do the same thing. Hold option, select the effect, drag it over to the appropriate chain, and there you go. All the settings from that plugin that you have on the other chain, copy right over. Next, we're going to take a look at option click back to 0. So most of the parameters in Logic and a lot of third-party plugins will allow you to option click, and it'll send that parameter right back to 0. For example, you could see that this one is set to -11, but if we want to restart and readjust, we hold option, click right there, and it goes right back to 0. This also works for things like pan. So if we had our pan all the way to the left, option click, back to 0. Bus amounts, option click, back to 0. The next tip is to put your automation in read mode, and that allows you to select a parameter and then automatically select its automation. So the way you do that is you want to go to Mix in your toolbar and select Auto Select Automation Parameter in Read Mode. Now when we go into our automation, we could select a parameter and it'll automatically select it in our automation channel. So I'll open up Serum here. So as you can see, for our pad synth, we have the volume automation selected. But if I want to change it to any of the parameters in here, I just click it and it automatically changes. So I don't have to worry about going into the menu here and going through all the parameters, especially with Serum because it has so many parameters that you can control. So it would be a pain if you had to go through this list every time. So just figure out which one you want, click it, and it automatically selects. The next tip to discuss is bouncing and freezing. These are both good ways of saving some CPU on your computer, especially if you have a little bit of an older computer like me. That's pretty important. Certain plugins and synthesizers like Serum take up a lot of CPU, so if you have your MIDI already figured out and you don't need to make any more changes to the synthesizer or the plugin, it's a good idea to bounce it out into audio to take up a lot less CPU. And the way we can do that is just by clicking on the region, bounce in place. I usually like to leave most of these settings, so it is going to mute the MIDI track that we have. If you like, you can just choose to delete it altogether. And now we have an audio copy of that sound. So then we would be able to delete this track if we want to save some space. The other good thing about bouncing MIDI into audio is it forces you to commit. So if you're spending a lot of time on a particular sound, then bouncing it to audio allows you to not be able to make any more changes and move on to the next part of your production. If you don't want to commit to making the bounce permanent, you can freeze it. And that's just a temporary way of bouncing it to take up less CPU. So as you can see in my track, like I said earlier, I have an older computer, so it's very necessary for me to freeze a lot of my tracks, or I'll just keep getting notifications that say system overload. And all you have to do to freeze a track is just click this little snowflake right here. If you don't see the snowflake, control click on your track, move down to track header components, and select freeze. Depending on the size of your track, it may take a little bit to freeze, but once it's done, that track will be frozen temporarily. When a track is frozen, you'll notice that all the effects on the effect chain are grayed out, and you won't be able to change anything. So if you do want to change something, you just have to unfreeze it, make your changes, and then freeze it again. All right, next we're going to take a look at folders and stacks, and this is a way to organize your tracks into separate sections. So as you can see here, I have my synths, basses, drums, leads, guitars. Everything that's kind of similar, I have them grouped together. All right, so you select all the tracks that you want to use, control click on any of them, and go down here to create track stack. Now it's going to give you two options, a folder stack and a summing stack. A folder stack is strictly for organization. It's going to put all the tracks into separate folders and allow you to collapse them and just keep them organized. A summing stack is actually going to send all those tracks to an individual bus, and it's going to allow you to make changes to that bus that will then affect all the tracks in that folder. I typically do summing stacks because it helps with organization, and if I want to make any adjustments, add a compressor or a reverb to an entire group, I'm able to do that. So as you can see, it automatically created a group at the next bus, which is bus 6. So all of these tracks are now sent to bus 6. If we pull up our mixer and we look at these tracks, we can see that all of the outputs are routed to bus 6. So any changes we make to bus 6 will be applied to each of those tracks. Next, we're going to take a look at the region inspector. So there's a couple different settings over here, and it's good to kind of know what some of these do. So you can quantize a region, make sure it's in perfect timing. You can transpose to change the key. You can mute and loop from this section as well. And if we pick an audio region, you'll see a couple similar settings as well as some different ones. So we have some fade in, fade out options. Also, one of the things that I use the most is this reverse box here, because it's just so simple. So if I'm creating like a reverse swell effect or anything like that, you can just grab the section here. We'll zoom in so you can see what it looks like and grab the one that I want. And this is a guitar, so it's kind of already in here, and I wouldn't normally reverse it just like this, but I'm going to reverse it to show you what it looks like. So you can see it jumps around, and you can also switch it back pretty easily. So that's a quick way to add some reverse swells to your productions. Next, we're going to look at forced legato. And what that means is just extending a note so it's being held all the way through the measure until the next note. So this is pretty useful when you have a situation where you want all of your notes to be held the exact same length, but you either played them or you added them in, and for some reason the notes didn't extend all the way to the end. So the best way to fix this is to select all the notes and hold shift and hit backslash. Sometimes you'll get this notice here warning you that some of the notes may overlap. Usually the best option in this case is to just select shorten. And as you can see, all the notes jumped right to the end of the measure there, right when the next set of notes begins. Next, we're going to look at how to change the tempo of an audio track. So I have a percussion top sample here from our Firestone production suite that I'm just going to drag into the project. And you can see this loop is at 100 BPM, but our track is at 96. Not a huge difference, but it's not going to work if we try to play it all together. So what we want to do is double click on the region here, go into Smart Tempo. Logic analyzes it and knows that it's at 100 BPM. So we're just going to go over here to Edit and hit Apply Project Tempo to Region and Downbeat. And now we can see that it fits completely in our 4-measure loop here. And if we were to play this with a metronome, we could see that it matches up. The next tip that we want to look at is another one that adjusts MIDI notes, and that is the Shift Option Click. Sometimes, depending on how we input MIDI, you'll have a lot of different velocities and lengths to your notes, and that could be okay if you're doing like a piano thing where you want that differentiation. But a lot of times, if you're doing more electronic music and you want just a synth to be exact, it's better to have all of those parameters exactly the same. And the way to do that really quick is to use the Shift Option Click method. So we're going to select all of our MIDI notes here. We're going to hit Shift Option, and then we're going to click on the length adjustment here. And once we click, you'll see everything snap into place. So unlike the forced legato, we can kind of choose where we want the note to end. With the forced legato, it's going to go all the way to the end regardless. But this, we can either put it to the end or we can kind of put it wherever we want now that they're all the same. This technique also works with velocity. So if we Shift Option Click on the velocity fader here, they're all going to snap in. Like I said, with something like a piano, you are going to want that differentiation in the velocity especially. But if it's just a synth, you kind of want them all to be the same velocity. So that's a quick way of making all the notes the same. And my final tip for today is a really simple one, and it's just using the notepad in Logic. So all you have to do is come up to this top right corner here and click on the little thing that looks like a notepad. And this is helpful when you're trying to keep track of your arrangement or the next steps that you want to do in your project. So if you have certain things that you want to address in a certain order, this is a good place to keep track of them. So that's it for today. These are just a few of the tips that helped me become a lot more efficient and effective when I'm making music. The amount of things that you can do in this software are actually pretty incredible. So I plan on making a lot more videos like this to show some of the tips that I've learned over the years. If you enjoyed this one, make sure you're subscribed here so you get notified when we release the next one. Also, don't forget to head over to Sandscape Audio and check out some of the resources that we have available over there. All right, y'all, that's it for this one. I'll catch you in the next one.